Hi, my name is Rolf Brink, founder and CEO of Asperitas. We're focused on immersion computing, which is based on immersion cooling.
I'm Peter Poulin, I'm the CEO of GRC, and like Rolf's company, we're focused on immersion cooling for data centers.
Green Revolution Cooling has been the longest operating immersion cooling provider. We came into the market in 2015. We did the development in 2015, came into the market in 2017. And ever since, we've been seeing a lot of traction for immersion in the market. And we've been working very hard to get the whole industry to a certain level of acceptance of immersion technology. Now, something happened in the last couple of years where this traction actually resulted in more immersion companies popping up, but also more misinformation or lack of knowledge being present on the market. So, since we all need to be able to grow, and the market also needs to be able to grow, we want to make sure that all the systems out there, all the immersion technologies out there, will be able to work with the same information, that the right message gets across, that there is no wrong information out there. There's a lot of confusion about different immersion technologies that confuse the message towards customers, and that's something that we just want to set straight.
I think experience is one of the things that really helps here. My director of product marketing is fond of saying, there's a lot of unknown unknowns out there, right? That you don't really get to understand and fully appreciate how the technology works or doesn't work without the experience of deploying in customers and having that. And so what we were starting to see was folks that maybe didn't have that experience and didn't maybe know what they didn't know. That was part of the challenge around creating that. Fortunately, we've had quite a bit of experience between us, and so we could actually, I think we started with, let's list all the questions we've been hearing, and I'll give you my answer and you give me your answer, and we'll see if they match up. And the reality is, they did pretty much match up.
Yeah.
So we felt very confident that we had information we could share for the benefit of the market that was accurate and consistent.
That's correct. So we're also very active in open compute. And Asperitas is a community-driven organization where we're also authoring white papers and creating industry standards, defining actually the very first industry standards. And what is extremely relevant there is the accuracy of the information, that the source of information is right, that the type of information is coherent, and that it's actually based on science.
One of the things I'd like to point out, before we get into the density discussion, and Rolf may have seen similar things, is while density is certainly the thing that comes top of mind when people think about immersion cooling, liquid cooling as a solution for that, it certainly is ideal for that. But we're finding a lot of the early adopters, a lot of the customers we have are solving different problems than just the density problem. They tend to come in three flavors. They're out of power in their facility. And so by converting to immersion, they free up a bunch of power they were using for conventional cooling that they can now apply to their compute. So the percentage of power that goes to compute, the stuff that actually generates ROI for the company, is now going to compute. The other thing we see is space. And that's particularly true in certain markets, Asia as an example, or New York City if you're a high frequency trader, where space is really expensive, and the fact is, immersion really is more space efficient than traditional cooling. And then the final one we're seeing is, with all this momentum around edge computing, one of the challenges in edge computing is location, right? You can't necessarily have your traditional white space in all these thousands, tens of thousands of edge locations. So having a technology that protects the most expensive assets you have, the IT equipment, from the environment around it, allows you to remove all of those location constraints.
And that's actually proven, that point is really, that's one of the strongest points, I believe, at this point in time in the market. I just want to repeat the conversation I had yesterday morning with somebody, which really applies here. With somebody who said, well, you know what the difficulty is with immersion technology? You can't just get it into a white space. You can't physically get it into a white space. And I was like, hang on. When's the last time you went to an event like this, Data Center Dynamics, and you saw an air-cooled rack, fully equipped with servers, actually switched on running at performance. Have you ever seen that on an event like that? No, of course not, because you can't run it on an event because it's not a data center. Well, here on this event today, there is 4 immersion technologies live running. It's basically 4 different data centers running here on the event that has never been designed as a white space or a you have to start asking the question, if you really believe that you can't get an immersion technology into your white space, which side of this discussion is the problem? Because the immersion technology, just look around you, you can deploy it wherever you like. You don't need the data center to deploy it. It's great if you have one, but especially when it comes to these edge deployments, this is where the world is changing. I'd like to add one other argument as well, and that is especially the case here in Europe, less so in the United States, as you know, but that's the sustainability aspect. Data centers are massive power plants that generate massive amounts of heat. Europe needs to get away from gas as a source of heat. And this is where data centers can play a fundamental role in the energy transition. And this is where liquid cooling is essential, because the waste product from an immersion system is hot water. And it's so obvious, and that this is something that is also tied into edge computing, to all the market growth that we're seeing. So if we look at where the market's going to be in 5 years' time, it should be wildly different from today. Because if we look at immersion technology now, the type of questions that we're answering are not about proving the point about immersion technology. There have been several announcements about roadmaps towards immersion, crediting immersion. You can't avoid immersion towards the future from all the hyperscalers, and the type of roadmaps that are being published are related to 2020, 21 and 22, but there's not much that stretches beyond that. So that is a point that we should be seeing some mass migration towards several types of liquid cooling, but eventually also a large portion of that will be immersion cooling, simply because of the holistic synergy that it represents.
Well, and I think, if you look at data center architecture in general, if you listen to what Gartner espouses these days, right? They don't think about it now as just these monolithic data centers, right? With the growing proliferation of edge computing, right? You've got a much more distributed architecture than you had before, right? So you've kind of got layers of data centers, the big monolithic, the regional level, all the way out to the 5G tower, right? And everything in between. So what are the technologies that are going to enable that? Coming back to our discussion about location constraints, if you're going to have a broad distributed architecture, this web, and thinking about data centers in a completely different way, you're going to need technologies that can support that eliminate a lot of those location constraints. So I think that's one of the things that will drive it. Now clearly we're also seeing particularly high performance computing, AI, stuff that's using GPUs and even moving to ASICs and FPGAs. That used to be the domain of academic supercomputing, right, and the national labs. We're seeing it more broadly being used across all verticals. And with that comes that other element we talked about, the density element, and how are you going to integrate those kinds of applications into your existing data center infrastructure? And I think that's one of the big benefits that Rolf and I have been able to deliver to our customers is it's not disruptive to drop it into your existing data center because it's a self-contained system that doesn't disrupt everything else around it. And so I think that's another area where you start to see it move.
Any other tee-ups, anything you think we haven't covered?
There's one thing I think, it gets going back to the basics. Rolf and I had a conversation about this morning. There's still a lot of confusion about some of the very basic things. You often hear people talk about immersion with a single stroke and don't differentiate between single phase and two-phase immersion. And so often, a lot of the negative baggage associated with two-phase, we get painted with. We use single-phase immersion cooling. And so that's part of what we're trying to do in educating the market, is help them understand some of the very basic differences, that not all immersion is the same. Well, I think this is one of the most important points, and part of why we have this site together is some of the Immersion 101 questions. One of the most very basic ones is not all immersion is the same. And you have two-phase and single-phase immersion, and often the negative baggage with one or the other paints the other one with that, right? And you've really got to understand, as Rolf would say, the science of what's the difference between one versus the other, because it may have a material impact on your decision about which kind of technology you adopt.
That's correct. Yeah. This is something that you can also find within OCP. Yeah? So one of the published papers for this year is Immersion Requirements, that also outlines all the different types of technologies, the types of applications. And that sort of material is essential for the industry, to allow the industry to start growing. And also, the reality is there are some pros and cons arguments for all these different types and styles of technologies, but what it really does, it differentiates it with the different styles of technologies to different parts of the platform, or different types of customers, different types of deployments, where some of these values may be explicitly important and other values may be less relevant. And that is what is all part of a maturing industry. If you look at a small car versus a Volkswagen Polo versus a Mercedes-Benz versus a Tesla, you just can't get away with calling it all simply a car. It's different markets, it's different applications, and different purposes. Right? And the same thing is with immersion technology.
I think this is, neither one of us claim that immersion is the answer for every single use case that exists out there, right?
Yep.
But what we want to make sure is that customers have the facts so that they can make fact-based decisions about what technology is most appropriate for the use case they're trying to address at the time.
Exactly.
One of the reasons GRC participates, in particular in DCD London, is we found it's one of the best events to address decision makers, people that are actually driving the decisions in their organizations, versus those that are just simply browsing, collecting information, are curious. And that's critical for us to getting an ROI out of this. So that's the reason we come.
So this is the first time that Asperitas has exhibited at the DCD, and we're still exhibiting, of course. And the reason for doing so is because DCD is the most influential platform, and especially when it comes to maturing the industry, which is what we're all about, and getting this whole industry up to this high level, DCD becomes critical in enabling that, and this is the platform that it all needs to start with.